Hi, welcome to Outlaw Bookseller, and tonight we're going to talk about the work of Rupert Thompson and the novel of ideas. In this video, I'm going to try and give you an insight into the work of one of our premier novelists of ideas working in the UK today. He works internationally, he's travelled an awful lot, and he tends to work more in a European tradition, as I see it and as some of my colleagues and friends see it as well, and that will come up in the video. And we're talking about Rupert Thompson. Normally on this channel we do a lot about genre fiction, but I'm very keen on the novel of ideas, and I think if you normally watch for the genre fiction content you will enjoy this as well, so do stick with it. And I first became aware of Rupert in a big way with his book Divided Kingdom, which is a dystopian novel, broadly speaking, with a very psychedelic, oniric, dreamlike quality, which I really enjoyed. And it is in my top 5, I think it's top 5 or top 10 obscure dystopias. Really fantastic book. Really recommend that. And some years ago, I also read his book, The Insult, which is a marvellous book, which has sort of flashes of Saramago, Christopher Priest, Anna Kavan. These are the sort of people I think of, whether they're actually influences of Roberts. I can't really say. I know he's familiar with Saramago. And this is about a man who is mysteriously shot in the head, but he survives, but his vision is destroyed and he turns blind. But there's a very strange sensory twist that happens into this as soon as it gets going. It's utterly unpredictable. Absolutely wonderful. I'm rereading at the moment. I'm really enjoying it. I've shamefully only read 2 of Rupert's 15 books. There's 14 novels and autobiography, and during the event, which you'll see coming up and later in the video, I also bought a copy of Barcelona Dreaming. I know he's lived in Barcelona, which I'm going to read that next, really enjoy it. And in the video he is interviewed by a book-selling legend, a good friend of mine, about his work and about his new novel, How to Make a Bomb, which on one level could be seen as a parody of existentialism. The Guardian seems to think it's about some elements of toxic masculinity, but Rupert's books are never that straightforward. They're always really, really interesting. And they just have this amazing quality. And he talks in what follows about thinning, the supernatural, the relationship between reader and writer, how he works. And he is somebody who really walks the literary high wire, so I'm sure you'll enjoy this. And if you want to see Rupert reading from the new book, How to Make a Bomb, please subscribe to the channel, go to the community page, and you'll find that the video of the reading is shared there. And now a conversation with Rupert Thompson about How to Make a Bomb.
So what gave you the idea for this particular...
This was a really odd one. You see, writers hate that question. I mean, I've talked to loads of writers about it, and they always fear that question at festivals. You know, where do you get your ideas? They dread it. And I've always thought it's the most interesting question because, well, for a start, it's different every time. You know, I've written 14 novels, so, you know, there are 14 answers for that question. In this particular case, it's unlike anything else because what you've just listened to is exactly what happened to me. So I was returning. I mean, I'm not a historian. He's a historian returning from this kind of interdisciplinary conference, and I was just a writer who was at the International Literary Festival in Bergen, and the first one, I think. And I'd had a really good time in Bergen, but I was the last of everyone to leave. So most people left on the Sunday morning. I had to sort of wait a whole day until Sunday evening before my plane was going back to London, and I don't know why, but I went into a strange kind of, usually I love being in a foreign city and I'll explore the streets and take pictures and look through people's windows and, you know, generally find out what's going on. In this case, all I wanted to do was sleep. I wanted the time to be over, and I wanted to be getting on the plane. So the day eventually passed, and then I got on the tram, and then this happened.
Because I found the fact that it happened on a commute because I'm a firm believer that people get into a sort of a really strange liminal state when they're on trains, buses.
But it wasn't a regular journey, you know. It wasn't something. It was a one-off.
Yeah, but it was a nature that the you know, the tapping of the card sort of triggered this. Is that actually how it happened?
Yes.
When it happened to you, it was literally the beep of the.
Yeah, I was going to.
And the voice telling you the train stops.
Yes, and I did think
the combination of those things.
And the sentence that I think's really funny, the funniest sentence in the bit I read is the bit about where he thinks the only thing I can possibly do is commit suicide because actually there was no other way I could think of making it stop, as he says, because closing my eyes didn't make any difference and there was nowhere to look. And if it continued like that, it was unbearable. It was unbearable. And in fact, my editor in this publishing company loved this title, but the other title that he came up with was, he said, I just saw it in the text and I thought it'd be good. The Most Unbearable Thing. He suggested that, and I really liked it. It had a kind of Milan Kundera sound to it. And a European sound to it, which I liked. But in the end, we went for this because it's sort of how it was my title, and it was something I hadn't been able to use.
You do have quite a European approach in some ways to reality, and in
a European approach to reality.
Yeah, which is definitely, as far as
I need you to
goes,
talk a bit more about that.
There's always a slightly the ambiguity in the book really reminded me of things like Javier Mares and people like that.
No, I mean those are the people I read. I, funnily enough, don't read that much British fiction, and you know, if you ask me who my favourite writers are, they tend to be people that you'd have to read in translation.
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of things in translation during COVID. Weirdly, my reading in translation went like, and that's when I read like 6 Mares novels in 2 years, and it just completely blew my mind.
There's him. There's Roberto Bolaño. I love. There's Annie Ernaux in France, and there's Patrick Modiano in France, and there's Jenny Erpenbeck in Germany, and I can't say his name, but Laszlo Krasznahorkai, Satan Tango in Hungary, and they're the people I go to.
Yes.
So maybe it's.
I mean, but you have a very British sensibility as well, so it's a really super interesting combination.
I don't really know what that is.
I find.
Is it the humour?
There's the humour, and there is a certain. I don't know, it reminds me of things, of the sort of strange edges of things like Graham Greene, and the way that you do your characters, and the way that there's the situations that they can end up in through.
I have to say one more thing about the beginning of the book though, and where the idea came from, because so that happened to me, and I came, and then about a year later, I was talking to my US publisher, who's my main publisher, and she said, "What are you working on next?" And I said, "Well," and I sort of thought, what if I wrote a series of essays, personal essays, about moments in my life where reality sort of suddenly turned strange on me, you know, and it could be any. I had a number of ideas. For essays. This was one of them. And there were others. I mean, there was going to be one about me nearly drowning in Mallorca, because I'm a swimmer and I swim every day, and it was this moment of you know, not having sufficiently respected the water, and being out of my element in the sense that I wasn't familiar with that particular part of Mallorca and that sea. So sure, there were various. I had various essays. I had a great title for the book, which was Tolstoy's Lake, because I'd swum in Tolstoy's Lake, and there was going to be a story about being in Russia. Anyway, so my US publisher, we're in France, and she said, "What are you thinking of working on next?" And I started talking about this book of personal essays, and she just suddenly went, "No one wants that." I was a bit taken aback. And she's often very direct.
Yeah.
It sounds like it.
It seemed to go a bit further, you know. It's almost like I had to go to my room and recover a bit. And a funny thing was, I listened to, you know, I obviously didn't write that book. I think actually, in retrospect, she was probably wrong. You know, I think people quite like books of personal essays. I mean, Maggie O'Farrell's done one. Lots of people have done them.
Well, I think it's a real art as well. It's because you can really, as far as what, you know, that ambiguity, it's a thing you can really.
It's also like a take on memoir, the whole form of memoir, because the personal essays are kind of like little mini memoirs in a way, you know. So,
but you can do different things with that form. I think that you can't necessarily do with autobiography, or that you don't get in biographies. You've got more license to travel into murkier water. I think subjectively, it's a real art that. And it would suit your style, I would say. Well,
the funny
if
thing
you
was,
have a style. You know?
If I have a style. No, the funny thing was that then I thought, well, I still really like that. It was so powerful what happened to me, and it was so unusual, and sometimes now, like a sort of, I mean, I've never done acid, but people have acid flashbacks, and you know, where that comes back in a minor way. The bad trip comes back, I mean. And there are moments where every now and then I get a little flicker of that on the London Underground or something. Like I get a moment where I suddenly feel that's almost going to happen again. I mean, I hope it doesn't, but it doesn't. But it might just be that I'm remembering what that was like to experience rather than it coming back.
I've definitely had that on public transport. And it's not very nice, but I found this book very psychedelic in certain parts. Especially
in a way, that's not the bit I read isn't the most psychedelic part, in a sense, is it?
No,
the most hallucinogenic part.
No, but it sets it all up, and it's as it
but you see,
up.
I think you know, like in Barcelona Dreaming, where one of my favourite moments in that book is where that seedy guy Vic Drago is describing a wild boar appearing on his 9th floor balcony, you know, and this terrifying thing that he's describing, which obviously can't happen. There's no way for a wild boar to be on a balcony 9 floors up. I mean, a terrace, I should say. But I've always sort of thought that those things are as real as the ordinary things that happen in a book. You know, there should be a way of writing them so that they can be treated by the reader in exactly the same way. So you have to kind of somehow create, in a book, you have to kind of create the atmosphere for the reader that anything you do can be believed.
As in the place where the story is happening.
If they don't, then you've lost them, and there's no, you know, then the book starts to fail. But
that is something that you do. Like over and over again, in my opinion, in your books, that you create a world where these things can happen, and it's not like a fairy tale land by any degree, but it's totally convincing when like the stranger elements of it happen because of the way you set it up. You completely buy it like straight off. Especially the more like the really stranger moments, especially in that third part of Barcelona Dreaming, with the whole thing with the chest of drawers and all that. So that was like really. But
that
strange.
is the wild boar.
I was up because I thought that was
the chest of drawers kind of is.
I thought that was the middle one. The thing is,
no,
but it was like being in a dream reading the book anyway. So it's not surprising I've lost track of which thread it was.
Well, there's because they find the chest of drawers. There's this strange chest of drawers, isn't there, that he buys, and he's told that it's this made of Russian birch wood, and that the birch wood has been cut by the light of a full moon. Therefore, it has this extraordinary quality. About it, whether he's talking about the quality of the wood or what he's talking about. This man who sells him the
it's definitely left very open. that whole
But the
bit.
fact that, you know, after the wild boar has appeared on the terrace, the next day it's the chest of drawers that's on the terrace
Yeah.
for some reason, and he doesn't know how it got there.
And it was very, and that's like really supernatural, and it really didn't come across like a ghost story, even though
No, because I don't think
Definitely.
those things are. There's not such a big. For me, there's not such a big dividing line between those things anyway.
no,
I think it's rather like you can be in the world and you can be in these places that are called thin places, where the dead and the living are much closer together than they
Sure.
might be otherwise, and that sort of feels normal to me. So
So do you think that's why that situation hit you so hard? This how to make a film situation.
I don't-
hit you so
I
hard?
don't know.
Because
I
it
mean-
seemed like it was like, oh, this is really happening now.
I just thought it was a really good beginning for something.
Sure.
I mean, if it wasn't going to be an essay, you see, I don't know what I would have done. I don't know I don't know where I would have gone if I'd written an essay on,
Sure.
on the basis of that.
Okay.
That
And
I
so
don't know
now,
what
right?
I don't know where that would have led. It wouldn't have led to where this book went.
Okay. So like having the freedom to write a novel about it.
Yeah, and I was
Right.
and I just thought it might. And this is, I guess, what an idea is for me. It's something that it can be a whole experience like this, or it's much more likely though to be an image or something really quite vague.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of a good example.
And do they just come from all?
They
sorts
can
of
come from
places?
anywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a bit. Maya Angelou once said that she liked to think of her body as an ear, and I think that's a beautiful way of putting. That's a beautiful way of saying that you sort of you need to pay attention to what's around you, and then you'll really see things. And I think as part of that paying attention, which is something I try not to take anything for granted. It's very easy when you're in the same world day after day and you're living in the same place to start to take everything for granted and not see it for what it is. Just assume it's like it always is. You know, you just make assumptions all the time. And travel does the opposite. You know, travel allows you to see things afresh all the time, and as a result, time gets longer somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to
So-
say about because you seem to spend a lot of time, and you have done.
Less so
for-
recently, but
like,
no,
like
it was my theory. I had this
travelling
theory
around
about
the world,
if
living in other countries. And,
I had this theory about making my life seem longer. That the best way to do that was to keep moving.
right. Okay.
Because I remember once I was away for 6 months, and I can't remember where I was, but when I came back to London and I saw all the people I knew, 2 or 3 of them said, "It seemed like you only went yesterday.
Right.
It seemed like just the other day." And I thought, I've had a whole lifetime in this city, and I can't believe that nothing's happened to you. You know, I mean, it's just been more of the same. You know?
I mean, did it feel
And
like
in that moment, I sort of realised this is the way to do it, because if I sort of move every 3 months or 6 months or a year, you know, then my life's going to be much longer than other people's. It's already much longer, actually, in another way, because of course when you write books, you also you sort of live on another level as well. You know, so obviously you're living and doing all the normal things you do, but I love that thing that the German poet Rilke says, where he says the ultimate intuitions and insights will only approach you if you live in the work and remain there. So you know, when I'm working on a book, I work 7 days a week and I work all day, and so it really is like it's a world that becomes as real as the real world, as it were.
So you're completely.
And in fact, when
immersed
someone
in
comes to the door and I answer it, they usually seem more ghostly than the people
it. No, sure.
in my book that I'm writing about, because you know, you sort of have to. I mean, it's not going to feel authentic to the reader if you don't enter into it as the writer, if you don't become those people yourself, and you sort of have to become all of them. And you know, sometimes you hear about male writers whose female characters are a bit like cardboard or a bit one-dimensional, and you know, I won't mention any names, but that's true, and that's a terrible failing. You know, that writer should not have female characters in the novel, really, if he can't do them. You know, and so you have to be able to shift genders and shift sexualities, and that's part of what makes it real for the reader.
And what makes it real for you as a writer as well, which must be like Because you seem, I mean, you're so prolific.
But you see, not really, because I mean, someone said to me the other day, you really churn them out. That's the wrong verb.
Churn isn't quite the word.
I suggest that like the quality's a bit, you know. I mean, I've been doing this for, how long have I been doing this?
About 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, a lot more actually. The first book was published in '87, which means I started in '83.
Oh, sure.
So
yeah,
I've been doing it 40 years.
Yeah.
It's like, so 15 books in 40 years. It's not that prolific. I mean, I probably shouldn't write too many more.
I'm assuming you had. It looked like you had something on the going again already. A new book.
How do you know that?
You posted something about it on your Instagram.
Oh yes. Yeah, forgot about that. Oh, the handwriting thing. Yeah, because I'm excited about that. Yeah. No, I have no. I'm in an odd place because the book that I thought I was delivering next, I've done 7 drafts of, and but the ending. This has never happened before. I don't. I thought I knew what the end was, and then I wasn't happy with it, and then I thought of another end that was 40 pages longer. Yeah. And now I'm not really quite happy with that one either. Okay. And so I'm going back to the first ending and thinking of another version of that. So I don't know how it ends.
Yeah, that must be quite scary for a writer to not.
Well, the end's normally, it's usually the middle that's the problem.
Yeah,
this is quite odd.
Because your endings are always really satisfying.
Thanks. Right, so that's making it even more difficult. It's got to be satisfying.
No, but in the context of the book that you just read, which I often go like, how the hell is he going to wrap this up? You know, how is this going to end?
Well, this one was...
And that was a real thing.
This one was
too.
This one almost did it itself because, I mean, the character in this is someone who, he sort of imagines things before they happen, and then they happen and they're nothing like the way he imagined them. Usually and so there's several things that happen like that in the book. And it's not that he's always doing it, but there are a few examples, and some of them small and some of them take longer. And so the ending I always thought had to have that quality about it where, except perhaps it would be 2 things. So you've kind of got 2 imaginary endings, haven't you?
Yes.
And the reader gets to figure out, you know, because at this point I'm no longer the authority on this. You know, I don't know what I'm even doing here really, because there's this wonderful. I saw this interview with a Swedish writer, Lars Noren, and he said, once the book is written, the author dies. And you know what he means is, what he meant about himself was, I'm the authority while I'm writing it. I'm the authority even up to the point when it's published. But once it's published, if you're lucky enough to have it published, then actually everyone who reads it is an authority because everything they say is valid. You know, and what I think the book is one version, and that's valid because I think it. But any of you could say what you think the book is, and it would be very different to what I think it is, and that's equally valid. And that's the beauty of a piece of fiction, isn't it? I mean, that's why it's such a wonderful form, because you take it and you sort of improvise on what you're reading with your own memory and your own psychology, and you create something new, you know. Mm-hmm. And everyone does that differently when they read. So I can tell you what I think this is.
But you sort of like once you've got it out there, you sort of.
Well, I've also changed my mind, you know, because I think part of the way I work is completely intuitive. Certainly the first draft, where I really do go into the unknown, and I don't know where this story is going to take me. So you know, yes, I had my own experience for the first 5 pages, but who knows what's going to happen after that? I had no idea, and that's important for me because you know it's important to have that. If I knew where I was going, I wouldn't have the exhilaration, I wouldn't have the mystery, I wouldn't have the panic, I wouldn't have all those things that makes writing fiction sort of worth doing for me.
Is that
if I planned it out
for you, that feeling of I don't know what's
I
don't know where I'm going.
Yeah, because you're sort of writing to find out what it is that you know. You know, like Auden said, I think he was asked, is it true that you only write what you know? And he said, yes, but I don't know what I know until I write it. And it's that kind of feeling. So I wrote this book and met my US publisher, the one who said that thing about no one wants that. And she went, this is just a book about a man deciding whether or not to leave his wife. And I went, no, it isn't. It's about a man who's seen through reality to how it really is, and he thinks other people need to see what reality is, and and they need to realise what they're living in, And she went, no, it's about a man and his wife. So I thought, fine, well, you're not going to change your mind. But actually, I think we're both wrong, because I've now reached a third position where I think it's actually about a man traumatised by the unhappiness of his child, of his only child. So, and this is something you could easily disagree with, but I noticed that, because, a lot of this stuff, as a writer, there are a million decisions on every page, and you can't make every one of them consciously. Some of it has to be intuitive, some of it has to be just to come from the unconscious, I suppose. How did you find the no full stops?
Well, so I was just about to ask you about that. So what made you write it in that form? Because in this sort of poetic stanza-like form.
Lots of things. Firstly, there's a friend of mine who writes emails to me, and she writes a line and then another line and then another line, and there's never any full stops. Okay. And it's because she's so busy. Because she doesn't have time to punctuate.
She struck them off.
She can't even go back. And I think actually she probably doesn't even use capital letters, but I didn't go that far.
Okay.
But it's like the idea of someone who's so caught up in their life that they can't even go back and check. And I thought, how interesting. That's really interesting. I'm sure. And suddenly that. And of course, that gives you the idea of being trapped in something, the busyness that she's trapped in, her perceived busyness. And also, there's a kind of, when you start looking at it, it looks like there's a momentum or a kind of a velocity, like a moving forwards really quickly.
Yes.
And something maybe unstoppable about it, about the process, about the life that this person is leading. It's something they can't, like a runaway train.
Well, yeah, and that was the sort of thriller, if you like, ish element of it.
But against that, weirdly, I sort of felt like if you laid it out like that, because the sentences just go to the end of the line, and if it hasn't finished the sentence, it goes to the next line, and when it finishes, it stops, and then you go to the next sentence, the next line. So on the page, it looks like poetry. There's lots of space, but the weird thing is, several people have said that actually, while it sort of seems to create a feeling of velocity, it actually slows you down as a reader. Partly, perhaps, I think, because it looks like blank verse or poetry, So and we're used to reading poetry more slowly than we are prose. And there's also this kind of feeling as if, because the sentences look a little as if they're floating on the page, so there's also a feeling like you're a bit adrift, you're floating, which of course the main character is. So in all these ways, the floating, the being adrift, the being caught up in something that's unstoppable, all that seemed to work really well with the character's predicament.
For sure.
And then I kept coming across things that made me think it was a really good, reinforcing me in that approach. Oh no! I'm sorry. I have to come back.
Given the reading of that first part, I'm sure I will.
As I was saying to someone else, it's always worrying when you do bookshops, because
he is a lot better.
even if people like your work, they don't necessarily go to see you.
He does this really good thing when he's introducing the main character.
and you know, it's like one wino in the front
He depicts him to
row, and that's it.
When you work in a school library and you invite an author in, you often have a captive audience.
Right.
Yeah, he is funny, actually. He does this thing.
Thanks, Victoria. Thanks for
so
coming.
much.
Yeah,
Nice
take
to
care.
We were just leaving, we thought Claire would love a photo. Could we take a photo?
Yeah. What, in the middle?
Oh, go on then, yes, just to prove that we were here.
Oh.
Just to rub it in.
Okay, there we go.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Seth. It's good we had a Seth here.
Fulfilling the prophecy.
Yeah.
I've never
Yeah.
met a Seth before.
What?
I've never
I
met
have.
Yeah.
I have met a
I
Seth.
was
No, it's
just
quite
gonna
an
say,
unusual
It
name.
is.
I've met two
It's
Seths.
quite a good name, actually.
Yeah, it is. It's
Yeah.
a very good name.
Yeah.
And
It's,
Right.
oh, lovely. Steve.
Yeah.
I'll
love that.
just, yeah. What do you want me to just write my name in?
Whatever suits you, Rupert.
Because I can't write the same thing in all of them, can I?
I don't mind.
What's
Whatever
that?
suits you. That's,
No, the other one.
that's Personal Dream. I always take the jacket off.
Right.
I'm one of those.
I love that edition.
Yeah,
of
we
the-
used to-
That's the American one.
Go-
Hardback. I've still got,
yeah.
found a few copies of.
Yeah,
and,
because it's so beautiful. Yeah, with the
it
white
was
jacket.
Chip Kidd.
Yeah,
Chip Kidd, who was an
yeah.
amazing book
Yeah,
designer.
Yeah,
yeah,
like-
big chip kid.
Because that was when I was at Knopf and everything. So
Yeah.
Knopf was like,
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Because that's in his book about all his book jackets.
yeah. Is it?
I was saying.
Yes.
Can I,
Yeah.
Yeah,
can I see
of course,
that?
you've got
Have
that.
a look.
When I read the insult, I thought of Charles Brockden Brown. I don't know if you've ever read Brockden Brown.
No.
Early American novelist. He was reportedly the first American writer to make his living just by writing. And he did some very interesting things with novelties in them, of cognitive estrangement. And they're much better known in the States than they are over here. There's one called Edgar Huntley, which is about Sleepwalker.
Right.
And there's one called Wyland, which is about a guy who can throw his voice.